Picture this. You're in class, you're teaching, you're lecturing, the kids are taking notes. And you get the sudden idea to maybe see how well the kids are receiving the information by probing a couple kids with a few different questions. So you ask one kid one question, and hey, they get it right. All right. So you ask the second kid a different question, and they get it right as well. So you think you're doing a pretty darn good job. You're a pretty good teacher. And then you ask the third kid a different question, and they might get it wrong. And maybe you ask a fourth kid a different question, and they get it right. And I thought, there's got to be a better way, because that took way too long to ask 4 kids 4 different questions and have them think about those answers on separate occasions. And this is where my wicked problem entered. Wicked problem number 1. How do I probe kids in my class all the same question and get them all to respond in a timely manner and get them quick feedback to both myself and to them? How well are they perceiving the information, both for me and for them? That's my wicked problem project number 1. The second problem comes into the kids being tied to the information that I'm teaching them. So often the kids really don't care whatsoever about the information because there's nothing vested in it for them. And so the second problem is, what can I do to get them really engaged throughout the unit? And my solution is very simple for both projects.
My solution is a student response system. And there are many different kinds of and companies. The picture on the right shows you the clicker system that I was using. But basically a clicker system or a student response system is a handheld texting device that each student picks up when they walk into the room. And for me, they were able to log in using their student ID, and it tied that student to that specific clicker. So when I ask a question, I'm able to collect data through the name of the student or the ID of the student, or I could collect it anonymously as well.
My solution for both of my problems is relatively simple and somewhat cost-effective. I thought of getting a student response system in my classroom. Now, I had a fellow teacher that taught down the hall from me that offered for me to borrow his student response system on occasion, and so that's what I've done. And my thought was to incorporate it into my note-taking and lecture portion of my class, and incorporate specific questions into the note-taking process. Number 1, I ask that question to the whole class, and the entire class responds, so I get an overall sense of how is the class understanding the information that I'm giving them. Second, if they're not understanding it well, I can then alter my lecture or my notes to better suit that class for that purpose. I teach the same subject 4 different times throughout my day. Each class may be confused on a separate issue, so I can tailor my notes to those specific classes for those specific students. That addresses my number 1 problem. My number 2 is tying the information to them, getting them to be vested in that information. And I thought creating a pretest and then a post-test, the same test which they'll take twice, once before we talk about it and learn the information, do labs and worksheets and practice, and then once after they've done all of that stuff. And that allows them to see, this is where I started. If I want to end up here, I've got to do all of this work in order to get there. And so that was my solution, was to incorporate and integrate a student response system, also called a clicker system, into my classroom as much as possible, especially into the note-taking process and a pre- and post-test monitoring process.
The next couple of slides are going to show you how my technology and my problem really fit well into the curriculum called TPACK. TPACK stands for Technological Pedagogical content knowledge. Okay? And if we look at that, we can break it down into what's called the technical pedagogical knowledge. And basically what that's asking is, how does the technology I have chosen support the teaching strategies and methods that I have chosen? So realistically, my teaching method really isn't changing all that much. But what is changing is my ability to alter my lectures based on the feedback I'm getting from my students using the student response system. So it allows us feedback for both the student and the teacher. The student can see, how well am I understanding this information personally, without anybody else knowing? How well am I, the student, understanding it? And for me, obviously, it allows me to tailor my lecture towards whatever the weakness is for a group of students. Maybe it's the whole class, maybe it's 5 students, but I can tailor my lesson to fit those individuals. Also, a pre and a post test gives motivation for some of those extrinsically motivated students. Maybe there's some intrinsic motivation based on, gosh, I thought I really understood the function of my body, but I failed the pre-test, so I better do a whole bunch of work in order to, when I take my post-test, to get a passing grade or to get a better grade that I'm used to getting. The next set of criteria talks about how technology incorporates with content. So how specifically does the technology make the content more intellectually accessible? Not only is there immediate feedback on my pre and post tests, it allows me to post my results for a pre-test or a post-test very quickly to online, so parents and students can all find out what they did, how they did on that pre and post test. It also gives them a better idea of how the student is understanding the material instantly. Me personally, as a teacher, gives me instant feedback how the student's doing. It also keeps those students that randomly daydream, they're off in Never Never Land, it kind of keeps them grounded, because every once in a while they've got to come back to the lecture and answer a set of questions in the clicker system. And obviously if they answer them wrong or they're completely off topic or off base, I'm going to be relatively know quickly that they weren't paying attention. It also allows me to create formative and summative assessments, things like exit slips. At the end of the hour, after I've lectured for a half hour, they've done some practice, I can say, okay, in your clicker system, answer me this. And it can be an open-ended question. What was one thing that you learned today? Or how did this change your life? Or tell me one thing that is still confusing about today's lecture. And then I can go back and read those and alter my lesson for the following day based on the information provided from the clicker system. The third aspect of the TPACK curriculum is the pedagogical content knowledge. And this is basically asking, how specifically does my pedagogical choices make the content more intellectually accessible? Obviously, these clicker systems allow me to reach multiple learners. They allow me a vast array of different types of questions, from multiple choice to true and false, to multiple answer, to opinion or open-ended, short answer questions. I could also use these clickers individually, or I can use them as a group to allow students to collaborate on information as well. This is an example of part of my sex ed unit talking about abstinence, and just wanted to show you how I've incorporated the student response system into this lecture. So the kids walk into my class and they automatically grab a clicker, log into that clicker, and answer me this question: list 3 risks of being sexually active. Once they've finished their bell work and I've taken attendance, I'm getting class started, an Excel spreadsheet would be made by all of the kids' answers, and I can either look at them individually as far as showing their name, or I can show them anonymously on the smartboard, and we can talk about them as a class. After we've talked about the bell work, we move on, and I start lecturing about abstinence, what it is, what a sexually transmitted disease is, and we move past to what sexual contact
entails, and finally we talk about the benefits of abstinence, beliefs versus reality. After this, I've posed another question in which they need to answer this in the clicker system. And once again, it'll give me a list of all of their answers, and it'll tie each answer to a student. I can either look at that student individually, or I can look at the class as a whole, showing anonymous answers as well. If I wanted to post all of them to the smartboard and have a discussion about their answers specifically, we could talk specifically about those answers. Here's an example of the results that are given from the student response system for one of the post tests for my sex ed unit. Now, it organizes the information very easily and very efficiently. It gives you a list of the names, their IDs, and what each student answered for each question. Down at the bottom, it gives you an answer key, and if the student got it incorrect, it will bold and turn the answer red, so you can very easily visually see which questions did the students really struggle with, and then go back and reteach it if this is your pre-test, and obviously breeze through questions that many people got correct. And if we transfer all the way to the end of this document, it'll give you what each student's raw score was, and then an overall percentage for each of them. So I could take their pre-test and their post-test and create a document similar to what I've shown you here. This is the same student as a pre-test got a 22, as a post-test got a 33. So they saw tremendous progress throughout the unit, and every student in this class did see some sort of progress. Some more than others, but it was a really easy way to organize my information and to see who really grasped it and who didn't. Okay, so there you have it. That's what I've incorporated so far into my classroom with regards to the student response system. I plan to do a whole lot more implementation. First thing is first, I need to write a grant so I can get my own. I'm using a Teachers Down the Hall, and I would like to get my own set so I can possibly use them every day. I also plan to create a pre and a post test for each unit here on out so that I can use them in every unit. I would also like to rewrite each of my lectures or my note-taking sessions to incorporate 3 or 4, maybe 5 questions throughout the lecture into the student response system, so that I can ask one question and have the entire class respond to me.